Welcome to English Audio Stories. In the previous chapter, Lucas Bennett finally left his quiet hometown and began his dream voyage aboard the Silver Crest. Along the way, he learned valuable lessons about courage, teamwork, patience, and staying true to his values. But just as everything seemed peaceful, a mysterious group of ships appeared on the horizon, changing the atmosphere aboard the vessel in an instant. Now, the adventure is about to take an unexpected turn. Sit back, relax, and continue your English learning journey with the next exciting chapter of English Audio Stories. Let's find out what awaits Lucas beyond the horizon. I don't know yet. Lucas appreciated that answer. The captain wasn't pretending to have certainty where none existed. He simply prepared for every possibility. For nearly an hour, the mysterious boats remained visible in the distance. Then, gradually, they drifted farther away until they finally disappeared beyond the horizon. Only after they were completely gone did the tension begin to ease. Noah let out a long breath. I didn't realize I was holding my breath. Several sailors laughed. Thomas smiled. Neither did most of us. Lucas walked toward Captain Rowe. Sir, may I ask something, of course? You changed our course before we even knew who they were. The captain nodded. Yes. Why? Because wisdom isn't about proving you're brave. It's about avoiding unnecessary danger. Lucas looked toward the empty horizon. Many people confuse courage with taking risks. Captain Rowe folded his arms. Real courage means protecting the people who depend on you. If I can keep every sailor safe simply by choosing another path, then that's exactly what I'll do. Lucas quietly reflected on those words. As a child, he had believed heroes always charged directly toward danger. Now he was learning that the greatest leaders often did the opposite. They recognized danger early enough to avoid it. That evening, the ocean returned to its peaceful rhythm. The setting sun covered the waves in brilliant shades of gold and crimson. It almost seemed impossible that only a few hours earlier, the entire crew had been preparing for trouble. Lucas opened his leather journal once again. He carefully wrote another sentence. The strongest people are not those who seek danger. They are the ones wise enough to recognize when peace is the better victory. He closed the journal and looked toward the glowing horizon. The sea had already begun teaching him lessons no classroom ever could. Every sunrise revealed something new. Every sunset left him a little wiser. And deep inside, he had the strange feeling that today's quiet warning was only the beginning of far greater adventures still waiting beyond the endless blue. The fourth day at sea began with complete silence, no wind, no crashing waves. The ocean had become as smooth as polished glass. Even the sails hung loosely from the towering masts. Several sailors looked uneasy. Lucas noticed the unusual expressions immediately. He walked toward Thomas Briggs. Something feels different today. Thomas didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked up at the sky. Too quiet. Lucas glanced around. I thought calm weather was a good thing, usually. But not when it arrives this suddenly. Lucas followed Thomas's gaze. The sky was perfectly blue. Not a single cloud floated above them. Everything appeared peaceful. Perhaps too peaceful. Captain Rowe slowly climbed onto the quarterdeck, carrying a long brass telescope. He studied the horizon in every direction. Minutes passed. Then he lowered the telescope. His face remained calm, but his voice carried unusual urgency. Secure every loose object. Double-check every knot. Nobody wastes a minute. Go. The crew scattered across the ship. Nobody asked questions. Nobody hesitated. Lucas hurried to help Noah tighten several cargo ropes. "Why is everyone moving so fast?" Noah pulled another knot tight. "Because the captain never gives orders without a reason." Lucas looked around. The sea still seemed harmless. Then he noticed something strange. The birds were gone. For the first time since leaving Ashbrook, not a single seabird circled above the ship. Even the dolphins had disappeared. The ocean suddenly felt empty, almost abandoned. Elias quietly walked past, carrying an extra coil of rope. Animals often notice danger before people do. Lucas felt a chill. Danger? Elias nodded once. "Let's hope I'm wrong." Hours passed. The silence grew heavier. Then a deep rumble echoed somewhere far away. Lucas looked toward the horizon. Nothing. Another rumble. Longer this time. Almost like distant drums beneath the sea. Thomas climbed halfway up the rigging. His voice rang across the deck. "Dark clouds west." Lucas turned immediately. At first he saw nothing. Then a thin black line appeared where the sky met the ocean. Within minutes that line grew taller, wider, darker. It wasn't moving across the sea. It was swallowing it. The bright afternoon sky disappeared little by little as enormous storm clouds rolled forward like mountains of smoke. Captain Rowe gave his next command without raising his voice. "Reef the sails, move." The peaceful ship instantly transformed into organized chaos. Sailors sprinted across the deck. Others climbed the towering masts with unbelievable speed. Lucas looked upward in amazement. Men were running across narrow wooden yards, nearly 100 feet above the ocean. The wind arrived without warning. One violent gust struck the ship from the side. The massive sails exploded with sound. Whoom! The entire vessel leaned sharply. Lucas nearly lost his balance. "Hold on!" Thomas shouted. Lucas grabbed a thick rope just as another blast of wind slammed into the ship. The calm ocean vanished in seconds. Waves rose higher. The deck tilted beneath his boots. Rain had not even begun. Yet nature had already revealed a fraction of its power. Captain Rowe stood firmly beside the wheel. His coat whipped wildly in the wind. His eyes never left the approaching wall of darkness. Lucas had never seen anyone so calm. Fear spread through the new recruits. Not through the captain. That calmness spread across the crew like fire through dry wood. If the captain believed they could survive, then perhaps they really could. Lightning suddenly ripped across the sky. For one brilliant second, the entire ocean turned white. Lucas froze. He had never witnessed lightning over open water before. The thunder arrived almost instantly. It wasn't simply loud. It shook the ship itself. Rain finally came. Not as drops, as sheets of water driven sideways by the screaming wind. Within seconds, everyone was soaked. The deck became dangerously slippery. Lucas struggled to keep his footing. Another enormous wave crashed against the bow. A wall of freezing seawater swept across the deck. Lucas was thrown backward. His hand slipped. For one terrifying heartbeat, he felt nothing beneath his feet. Only open air. His body slid toward the edge of the ship, toward the endless black ocean below. Time seemed to stop. Then a powerful hand seized the back of his leather vest. Thomas. With one violent pull, he dragged Lucas back onto the deck just before another wave crashed over them. Lucas lay there, breathing heavily. Rain poured across his face. Thomas knelt beside him. "Never fight the sea." Respected. Then he pulled Lucas back onto his feet. Can you still work? Lucas nodded without hesitation. Yes, good. Because the storm has only just begun. The sky disappeared completely beneath swirling black clouds. Daylight faded into an eerie gray twilight. The Silver Crest looked tiny against the towering walls of water surrounding her. For the first time since leaving home, Lucas truly understood the meaning of the word ocean. It wasn't merely water. It was a force beyond imagination. A force that demanded humility from every soul brave enough to sail upon it. The wind screamed like a living creature. Every wave seemed larger than the last. The Silver Crest climbed the face of one towering wall of water, only to plunge violently into the valley beyond. Lucas gripped the lifeline with both hands until his knuckles turned white. His arms burned. His legs trembled. Every muscle in his body fought simply to remain standing. The storm showed no mercy. Captain Rowe stood at the helm, his boots planted firmly against the deck as rain lashed across his face. His voice cut through the chaos. Keep her into the waves. Never let them strike from the side. The helmsman nodded. The massive wheel spun beneath his hands. The ship slowly turned. Seconds later, an enormous wave exploded directly against the bow. The impact shook the entire vessel. Wood groaned. Barrels shifted below deck. Lanterns swung wildly overhead. For one terrifying heartbeat, Lucas thought the ship had broken apart. Instead, the Silver Crest climbed upward once again. Thomas shouted above the roar of the wind. She's a strong ship. Trust her. Lucas looked around. Nobody was wasting energy panicking. Every sailor focused on one task: pull, tie, climb, hold, repeat. Fear still existed, but discipline had become stronger than fear. Another flash of lightning split the heavens. This time Lucas saw something that froze his blood. High above the deck, near the top of the main mast, a young sailor was trapped. One of the upper sail lines had wrapped tightly around his leg. Each violent gust swung him farther away from the mast. The sailor desperately clung to the rigging with one hand. If the rope snapped, he would disappear into the black ocean below. Thomas looked upward. Damn, Captain. A sailor's trapped. Captain Rowe raised his telescope only long enough to confirm it. Who is closest? Oliver pointed immediately. I am. The captain looked him straight in the eyes. Can you reach him? Oliver never hesitated. Yes, then go. Lucas watched in disbelief. Oliver sprinted toward the mast. Without stopping, he began climbing. Rain poured into his face. The mast swayed violently from side to side. Each gust threatened to tear him away. Yet he continued upward. Hand over hand. Foot by foot. The crew below stopped speaking. Every eye followed him. Even the storm itself seemed to disappear beneath the pounding of their hearts. Halfway up the mast, Oliver paused. A powerful gust nearly ripped him away. He wrapped both arms around the slick wooden spar and waited. Patiently. The moment the wind weakened, he climbed again. Lucas whispered to himself, "Come on. You can do it." The trapped sailor had almost lost his strength. His fingers slipped once, twice. He could not hold much longer. Oliver finally reached him. He secured his own safety rope before touching the tangled lines. Good. Lucas thought. Don't rush. Oliver pulled a small knife from his belt. Not to cut the trapped sailor free first. He secured him with another rope. Only then did he carefully slice through the twisted line, trapping the sailor's leg. The crew below erupted in cheers. But they weren't safe yet. Now Oliver had to bring both of them back down. The descent was even slower. Every movement demanded absolute concentration. Several times lightning illuminated the entire mast. For brief moments, both men appeared like tiny silhouettes suspended against a white sky. Lucas would remember that image for the rest of his life. Minute after minute, they descended. Finally, their boots touched the deck. The rescued sailor collapsed to his knees, breathing heavily. Oliver did the same. Neither man spoke. Captain Rowe walked over. He placed one hand on Oliver's shoulder. "Well done." Oliver simply nodded. He was too exhausted to answer. Lucas stepped closer. "Why did you cut the rope immediately?" Oliver smiled weakly. "Because then he would have fallen." Lucas suddenly understood. Sometimes solving one problem too quickly created an even bigger one. Captain Rowe looked at the gathered recruits. "Remember what you saw today. Speed is valuable. Preparation is priceless." The storm continued raging throughout the afternoon. Rain hammered the deck without pause. By evening, the waves had grown even larger. Then came the loudest sound Lucas had ever heard: crack. The entire ship shuddered. Every sailor looked upward. One of the enormous upper yards had split cleanly in half. The heavy timber swung wildly above the deck, suspended by only a few remaining ropes. If it broke loose completely, it would crush anyone standing below. Thomas reacted instantly. "Clear the deck, move." Sailors scattered in every direction. The broken spar swung through the air like a giant pendulum. Each swing came closer to the deck, closer, closer. Lucas watched in horror. One more rope snapped. The timber dropped another 6 feet. The next break would send several 100 pounds of solid oak crashing onto the crew. Captain Rowe made his decision without hesitation. Axes, now. 2 experienced sailors rushed forward carrying heavy axes. Instead of saving the broken spar, they began cutting away the remaining support ropes. Lucas stared in disbelief. "Why are they cutting it loose?" Thomas answered while helping secure another line. "Because sometimes the only way to save the ship is to let part of it go." Seconds later, the final rope parted. The enormous timber crashed harmlessly into the raging sea. For a brief moment, everyone simply watched it disappear beneath the waves. A valuable piece of the ship had been lost, but dozens of lives had been saved. Lucas felt another lesson quietly settle inside his heart. Not everything worth holding on to should be held forever. Some burdens must be released before they destroy everything else. Night fell. The storm showed no sign of ending. Yet somewhere beneath the deafening wind, beneath the crashing waves, beneath the endless rain, the crew of the Silver Crest had begun winning a different battle. Not against the ocean, but against the fear growing inside themselves. And Lucas realized that battle would continue long after the skies became clear. Morning arrived without sunlight. A thick blanket of gray clouds still covered the sky. The storm had finally weakened during the night, but the ocean continued breathing in long, powerful swells. The Silver Crest rose and fell with each rolling wave. Not violently anymore, almost peacefully. Lucas stepped onto the deck. For a moment, he barely recognized the ship. Several railings had been torn away. One lifeboat was missing. Pieces of broken timber lay scattered across the deck. The once pristine sails were patched with temporary repairs. Everything looked exhausted. just like the crew. Yet no one complained. Instead, sailors quietly picked up tools and immediately began repairing the damage. Captain Rowe walked across the deck, stopping beside every crew member. He spoke only a few words to each of them. "Good work. You held your position. Excellent repair. Check that beam again." His calm voice carried more encouragement than a long speech ever could. Lucas picked up a broom and began clearing splintered wood without being asked. Thomas noticed. "You remembered." Lucas looked up. Remembered what a real sailor never waits to be told the obvious. If something needs doing, do it. Lucas smiled. The lesson felt simple, but he knew it would stay with him forever. By midday, patches of blue finally appeared between the clouds. Warm sunlight spilled across the ocean once again. The sea transformed before their eyes. Yesterday it had looked like a monster. Today it glittered like polished crystal. Nature had changed completely. Yet it was still the same ocean. Lucas leaned against the railing. "It almost feels unfair." Elias joined him. "What does yesterday it tried to destroy us? Today it looks so beautiful." Elias laughed softly. "People often make the mistake of believing beauty and danger cannot exist together." He pointed toward the calm sea. "The ocean has always been both. So has life." Lucas looked thoughtfully across the endless water. Perhaps the most important things in the world could never be understood with only one experience. Late that afternoon, a loud cry echoed from the highest lookout platform. "Ship ahead." Every sailor instinctively looked toward the eastern horizon. Far away, a tiny silhouette appeared against the sunlight. Captain Rowe accepted his telescope. For several long moments, nobody spoke. Finally, he lowered it. "Not a merchant ship." Thomas frowned. Military Captain Rowe slowly shook his head. "No. Something worse." Lucas felt the atmosphere tighten again. "Worse." Captain Rowe handed the telescope to Thomas. "See for yourself." Thomas looked through the lens. His expression changed immediately. "It's drifting, no sails. No movement. No signal flags." Lucas stepped closer. "What's wrong with it?" Thomas answered quietly. "Nobody abandons a ship without a reason." The mysterious vessel floated alone. The wind gently pushed it across the empty sea. Its sails hung in tatters. One mast had snapped in half. Parts of the hull were blackened, as though fire had once consumed them. Most unsettling of all, there wasn't a single person visible on deck. Captain Rowe gathered his senior officers. The recruits stood nearby, listening carefully. "We have three choices," the captain said. "Ignore it, destroy it, or investigate." The officers exchanged uncertain glances. One sailor spoke first. "It could be a trap." Another nodded. "Pirates sometimes leave empty ships to lure rescuers closer." A third sailor disagreed. "What if there are survivors below deck?" Silence followed. Captain Rowe looked toward Lucas and the other recruits. "Tell me something. If one day our ship were lost, would you hope another crew sailed away? Or stop to help?" Nobody answered immediately. The question required no explanation. After several seconds, Thomas spoke. "We investigate. Carefully." Captain Rowe nodded. "Prepare the longboat." Lucas felt his heartbeat quicken. "A rescue mission." The captain turned toward the recruits. "Lucas, Oliver, Thomas. You're coming with me." Lucas blinked. "Me." Captain Rowe smiled. Every sailor must eventually learn that courage isn't only surviving storms. Sometimes, it's rowing toward the unknown. Within minutes, a sturdy wooden longboat was lowered into the water. 6 men climbed aboard. Captain Rowe sat at the stern with the tiller. Thomas held a loaded signal flare. Oliver checked coils of rope. Lucas gripped the oars. "Ready?" Captain Rowe asked. Everyone nodded. "Push off." The longboat drifted away from the safety of the Silver Crest. For the first time since beginning the voyage, Lucas felt very small. The merchant ship that had seemed enormous now grew smaller behind them with every stroke of the oars. Ahead, the abandoned vessel slowly emerged from the mist. Every minute revealed another unsettling detail. Broken windows, charred wooden beams, a shredded flag hanging lifelessly from the remaining mast. No birds landed on it. No sound came from it. Only the gentle creaking of old timber echoed across the still water. Lucas tightened his grip on the oar. Something about the ship felt wrong. Not because it was damaged, because it felt as though time itself had stopped aboard it. When they were only 50 yards away, Captain Rowe quietly raised one hand. "Stop rowing." The longboat drifted silently across the calm sea. Every man listened. Nothing. No voices. No footsteps. No movement. Only the slow knocking of loose wood against the abandoned hull. Captain Rowe looked upward. The ship's name was barely visible beneath soot and salt. The faded letters read, "The Midnight Star." No one aboard the longboat spoke, because every experienced sailor knew one truth. Ships did not simply become empty. Something had happened here, and whatever story the Midnight Star was hiding, they were about to become part of it. The longboat drifted silently beneath the towering shadow of the Midnight Star. From below, the abandoned vessel looked far more intimidating than it had from a distance. Its hull rose nearly 40 feet above the water, scarred by deep black burn marks that climbed toward the shattered deck like the fingers of a giant hand. Long strips of torn sail fluttered weakly from the broken mast. Every movement produced a slow, mournful creak. It almost sounded like someone breathing. Lucas swallowed. No one said a word. Captain Rowe slowly stood. Grappling hook. Oliver handed him a heavy iron hook attached to a thick rope. The captain swung it once, twice, then launched it upward, clang. The hook caught the railing. He gave the rope 2 firm tugs. "It'll hold." Thomas looked toward Lucas. "You stay close to me." Lucas nodded, "Always." One by one they climbed. The wet rope swayed gently over the dark water below. Halfway up, Lucas accidentally looked down. The sea suddenly felt impossibly far away. His hands tightened instinctively. Thomas noticed. "Don't look down." Lucas immediately lifted his eyes. A few seconds later, he pulled himself over the railing. The deck was empty. Completely empty. Rainwater still rested in shallow puddles between the weathered planks. A broken lantern rolled slowly back and forth each time the ship moved with the waves. Several crates had burst open. Their contents lay scattered across the deck: barrels, pieces of cloth, rusted cooking pots. Nothing unusual. Yet everything felt abandoned in a terrible hurry. Captain Rowe crouched beside the main mast. He touched one of the black scorch marks with 2 fingers. It wasn't lightning. Thomas examined it. Fire. But not for long. Lucas frowned. "How can you tell?" Captain Rowe rubbed the charred wood between his fingers. If the fire had spread. He looked around the ship. There wouldn't be much left. So someone stopped it. or it died on its own. Neither answer made Lucas feel better. As they continued forward, Oliver suddenly raised his hand. "Wait." Everyone froze. He pointed toward the deck. Footprints. Several muddy footprints stretched across the soaked planks. Lucas leaned closer. "They're fresh." Captain Rowe nodded. "Very fresh." Thomas looked around carefully. "So someone has been here." Lucas's heart began beating faster. Could they still be here? No one answered. The silence itself became the answer. Captain Rowe drew a small pistol from beneath his coat. Not because he wanted to use it, because he wanted everyone else to return home safely. They continued toward the captain's cabin. The heavy wooden door stood slightly open. It moved gently with each passing wave. Creak, creak. Captain Rowe slowly pushed it wider, inside. The room looked surprisingly untouched. Charts remained spread across the desk. A compass rested beside an unfinished cup of tea. The tea had long since dried inside the cup. A chair had fallen onto its side. One window had shattered inward. Glass covered the floor. Lucas noticed something strange. The logbook. Captain Rowe looked up. "What about it?" "It's still here." He pointed toward the thick leather book lying open on the desk. Captain Rowe carefully picked it up. Most captains would never abandon their logbook. It contained everything: routes, cargo, crew, weather. Every important decision. He gently turned the pages. The writing remained neat until the final entry. Then, the handwriting changed. It became hurried, uneven, as though the person writing had been interrupted. Captain Rowe quietly read the last page. The fog returned before sunrise. Thomas looked up. Fog. The captain continued reading. Several crew members claimed they hear knocking beneath the hull after dark. Lucas exchanged an uneasy glance with Oliver. Captain Rowe turned another page. It was blank. Then another blank. The journal simply stopped. No explanation. No ending. Only silence. Thomas frowned. "That's impossible." Captain Rowe closed the book. "Not impossible." He looked around the cabin. Unfinished. Suddenly, thud. Everyone spun toward the hallway. The sound had come from somewhere below deck. Another thud echoed upward. Then another, slow, heavy, as if something large had fallen over. Lucas instinctively stepped backward. Thomas raised his lantern. Probably loose cargo. Oliver wasn't convinced. Loose cargo doesn't stop. Then start again. Silence returned. Nobody moved. Even the ocean outside seemed to hold its breath. Then, a faint voice drifted upward, so weak that Lucas wondered if he had imagined it. "Help." Every man looked at the others. They had all heard it. Captain Rowe's expression changed instantly. Someone's alive. Without wasting another second, he grabbed the lantern and hurried toward the staircase leading below deck. The narrow wooden steps disappeared into complete darkness. Cold air drifted upward from below. It carried the smell of damp timber, salt water, and something else, smoke. Very faint, but unmistakable. Captain Rowe lifted the lantern. Its golden light pushed back the darkness just enough to reveal the first few steps. Everything beyond remained hidden. He looked over his shoulder. "Stay together. No one wanders off." Thomas nodded. Lucas took one slow breath. Moments earlier, the Midnight Star had seemed like nothing more than an abandoned ship. Now, it had become a mystery. and somewhere beneath their feet, someone was still waiting. Captain Rowe descended first. The lantern in his hand cast trembling shadows across the narrow staircase. Each wooden step groaned beneath his boots. Lucas followed only a few feet behind. Thomas walked close enough that Lucas could hear his steady breathing. Oliver came last, carefully watching the passage behind them. The deeper they descended, the colder the air became. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, drip, drip, drip. The sound echoed through the empty corridors like the ticking of an invisible clock. At the bottom of the stairs, the lantern revealed a long passage stretching into darkness. Rows of cabin doors lined both sides. Most hung open. A few had been ripped from their hinges entirely. Furniture lay scattered everywhere. Broken dishes covered the floor. An old clock had fallen from the wall, its cracked face frozen forever at 2:17. Lucas whispered, "It looks like everyone left in the middle of something." Captain Rowe nodded slowly. People don't abandon meals. People don't leave doors open. Something interrupted them. Something urgent. Suddenly, the faint voice returned, "Help." This time it was clearer. Definitely human. Definitely alive. Captain Rowe pointed toward the far end of the corridor. That way. They moved quickly now, careful not to make unnecessary noise. The lantern light danced across damp wooden walls. Every few steps, the ship let out another long creak. It almost sounded as though the old vessel were complaining about strangers walking through its halls. Lucas glanced into one of the open cabins. A small stuffed rabbit rested on the floor beside a child's wooden toy boat. Dust covered both. He stopped walking. Thomas gently touched his shoulder. "Keep moving." Lucas nodded, but the image stayed in his mind. Families had once lived aboard this ship. Children had laughed here. Someone had carefully carved that little toy by hand. Now, only silence remained. The voice came again, "Please." Captain Rowe lifted the lantern higher. A heavy iron door appeared at the end of the corridor. Unlike every other door aboard the ship, this one was locked from the outside. Thomas frowned. Why would anyone lock this? Oliver examined the thick iron latch. Someone wanted whatever was inside to stay inside. Captain Rowe looked at Lucas. "Stand back." Thomas stepped forward carrying a short iron crowbar. He wedged it beneath the rusted latch, ready. He pushed with all his strength. Nothing again. The old metal groaned. Still nothing. One more time. With a loud metallic crack, the latch finally snapped. The heavy door slowly swung inward. The lantern light entered first. The room beyond was small, cold, almost completely empty, except in the far corner sat a man. He shielded his eyes from the sudden light. His beard had grown wildly across his face. His clothes hung loosely from his thin body. His wrists were bruised where old ropes had once been tied. For a few moments, nobody spoke. The man blinked several times before whispering, "You're real." Captain Rowe knelt beside him. "Yes. We're here to help." The stranger struggled to smile. I thought no one would ever come." Lucas quickly uncorked his water flask and handed it over. The man drank slowly. Very slowly. As though every swallow required effort. Thomas looked around the room. No chains, no food. Only an empty bucket. Someone had left him here. Captain Rowe spoke gently. "Can you tell us your name?" The man closed his eyes for a moment. "Daniel. Daniel Mercer." Lucas immediately noticed something unusual. Daniel wasn't old, perhaps 35, but his eyes looked decades older. Captain Rowe continued. What happened here? Daniel's expression changed instantly. Fear replaced relief. He looked toward the open doorway, as though expecting someone to appear. We have to leave now. Thomas frowned. There's no one else aboard. Daniel slowly shook his head. You don't understand. Captain Rowe remained calm. Help us understand. Daniel took a shaky breath. There were 38 of us, crew. Passengers, families. Everything was normal until the fog arrived. Lucas exchanged another glance with Oliver. The fog. The same words written in the captain's logbook. Daniel continued speaking. At first, it was beautiful. Thick white mist covering the sea. You couldn't see 20 yards ahead. We thought nothing of it. Then people started hearing voices. Voices calling their names. Some sounded like family. Some sounded like old friends. Lucas felt the hairs on his arms rise. Daniel looked directly at him. Have you ever missed someone so much that you'd follow their voice without thinking? Lucas quietly nodded. Daniel lowered his eyes. So did they. One by one, people walked into the fog. No one ever came back. Silence filled the room. Even Thomas had stopped moving. Captain Rowe spoke carefully. You're saying they simply disappeared? Daniel nodded. Some jumped overboard. Some lowered boats. Some just walked away. They believed someone they loved was waiting outside. Lucas struggled to make sense of the story. That doesn't seem possible. Daniel gave a weak smile. I know. I thought the same thing until I heard my wife calling me. The room fell completely silent. Daniel's hands trembled. She had died 3 years earlier. I knew that. I buried her myself, yet I could hear her voice. Perfectly. She kept saying, "Come home." Lucas felt an icy chill. Daniel looked at the floor. I almost opened the cabin door. The captain stopped me. He locked me inside. He said, if I begged to leave, if I screamed, if I threatened him, he was not to open this door. Captain Rowe slowly looked at the broken latch lying on the floor. Where is your captain now? Daniel closed his eyes. He stayed on deck to keep everyone else alive. His voice became almost a whisper. I never saw him again. A sudden gust of wind howled somewhere above. The old ship creaked from bow to stern. Lucas turned instinctively toward the corridor. The lantern flame flickered violently. Then, without warning, every flame aboard the lantern stretched sideways, as if a powerful breath had passed through the hallway. Thomas slowly looked toward the darkness behind them. Did anyone feel that? Nobody answered, because they all had. Something cold had just moved through the abandoned ship. Something that certainly wasn't the wind. Captain Rowe slowly lifted the lantern higher. The flame continued, leaning sharply toward the darkness. Not upward, not downward, sideways, as though an invisible current of air were flowing through the corridor. Thomas narrowed his eyes. There's another passage. Oliver looked puzzled. I don't see one. Thomas pointed toward the dancing flame. The lantern does. Captain Rowe walked carefully along the wall. His fingers traced the damp wooden planks one by one, solid, solid, solid. Then his knuckles struck something different. A hollow sound. He knocked again. Talk, talk. Unlike the heavy timber surrounding it, this section echoed from within. Hidden compartment. Oliver immediately searched the edges of the wall. After a few moments, he found a tiny iron ring almost invisible beneath years of dirt and salt. He pulled. Nothing happened. Thomas stepped beside him. Together, both men pulled with all their strength. The wooden panel suddenly lurched outward, releasing a cloud of stale air. A narrow passage appeared behind it. Completely dark. Daniel stared at the opening with horror. No. Captain Rowe turned toward him. You know this place. Daniel's face had turned pale. I've never been inside. Then why are you afraid? Daniel swallowed. Because the captain sealed it. Lucas frowned. Why? Daniel's voice trembled. He said no one should ever open it. Silence settled over the group. Captain Rowe held the lantern toward the hidden corridor. Dust floated through the beam of light like tiny golden stars. The passage sloped gently downward, almost disappearing beneath the ship. Thomas looked at the captain. Your decision. Captain Rowe didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied the worn wooden floor. Fresh footprints. The same muddy footprints they had discovered earlier. They led directly into the hidden passage. None came back out. The captain slowly stood. Someone entered. Oliver finished the thought, but never returned. Lucas felt his heartbeat quicken. Captain Rowe made his decision. We go together. No one gets separated. If anything feels wrong, we leave immediately. Everyone nodded. Even Daniel, although his hand still shook. The group entered the narrow corridor. The ceiling was so low that Thomas had to bend slightly. Water dripped steadily from ancient beams overhead. The air smelled of wet wood and rust. Every footstep echoed strangely. Lucas couldn't shake the feeling that someone was walking just behind them. Twice he looked over his shoulder. Nothing. Only darkness. The corridor twisted gently before opening into a circular chamber, unlike anything they had expected. It wasn't a cargo room. It wasn't crew quarters. It looked old. Much older than the rest of the ship. The walls were built from massive curved oak beams blackened with age. Ancient navigation instruments rested inside cracked wooden cabinets. Several enormous maps hung on the walls, their edges curled with time. In the center of the room stood an enormous globe, nearly 6 feet tall. Its surface wasn't painted with familiar countries. Instead, it showed oceans covered with handwritten notes, currents, storm routes, mysterious islands, strange symbols. Captain Rowe stepped closer. I've never seen a chart like this. Lucas slowly circled the globe. Who made it? No one knew. Daniel suddenly pointed toward one corner of the chamber. There, resting on an old wooden table, lay another journal. Unlike the captain's log upstairs, this one was wrapped in faded red leather. Captain Rowe carefully brushed away decades of dust. The cover carried no title. Only a compass rose burned into the leather. He opened the first page. Every line had been written by hand. Beautiful handwriting, precise, orderly. The first sentence made everyone fall silent. This journal is not for recording where the sea has taken us. It is for recording the things the sea refuses to explain. Lucas looked at Captain Rowe. The captain slowly turned another page. The entries stretched back nearly 40 years. Each described strange events witnessed across distant oceans. Lights moving beneath perfectly calm water. Voices carried across empty seas where no ships could possibly exist. compasses spinning wildly without reason, entire islands appearing on one voyage, then vanishing forever on the next. Oliver whispered, "Whoever wrote this was documenting mysteries." Captain Rowe nodded. "Not legends, observations." Lucas continued reading over the captain's shoulder. Most entries ended with careful conclusions. Natural explanation uncertain. Requires further observation. Possibly caused by unusual weather. The unknown writer seemed determined never to jump to impossible conclusions. Then, Captain Rowe reached the final completed page. The handwriting had changed. Not from fear, from exhaustion. It read, "If anyone discovers this journal, remember one thing. The greatest danger upon the sea is not what hides beneath the waves. It is the fear that enters the human mind before reason has a chance to speak." The room became completely silent. Thomas slowly lowered his lantern. "So the voices," Captain Rowe nodded thoughtfully, "may not have been real." Daniel looked confused. "But I heard my wife." Captain Rowe placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I believe you." He paused. "But believing you heard her, and believing she was truly there, are not the same thing." Lucas stared at the old journal. Perhaps the mysterious fog had not created monsters. Perhaps it had awakened memories so powerful that people stopped trusting their own judgment. Before anyone could speak again, a loud metallic clang echoed somewhere above them. Everyone froze. Another clang. This time closer. Thomas immediately extinguished the lantern. Darkness swallowed the chamber. Only a thin shaft of daylight filtered through a crack high above. Captain Rowe whispered, "Someone is on the deck." Lucas held his breath. They had searched the ship. They had found no one. And yet, heavy footsteps slowly crossed the deck overhead, one, then another, followed by the unmistakable sound of something heavy being dragged across the weathered planks. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Because every person in that hidden chamber understood the same terrifying possibility. Whoever was walking above them hadn't arrived with them. The footsteps continued, slow, measured, unhurried. Whoever was moving above them seemed completely unaware that 5 men were hiding just beneath the deck. Or perhaps he knew exactly where they were. Nobody dared to breathe loudly. Captain Rowe slowly raised one finger, signaling everyone to remain perfectly still. The mysterious footsteps crossed the deck, then stopped, right above the hidden chamber. Lucas felt his pulse pounding inside his ears. Another sound followed. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It was metal scraping against wood. Thomas leaned closer to the captain, barely louder than a whisper. An anchor chain. Captain Rowe shook his head. No. The scraping continued, long, steady, almost deliberate. Daniel's face turned completely pale. "I know that sound." Everyone looked toward him. His lips trembled. The captain used to drag a hook across the deck before every inspection. Lucas frowned. "But your captain disappeared." Daniel nodded slowly. "I know." Silence returned then. The scraping stopped. Heavy footsteps resumed. This time they moved toward the bow of the ship. After nearly a minute, nothing. Captain Rowe waited another 30 seconds before relighting the lantern. Its warm glow pushed the darkness away once more. Thomas quietly exhaled. "I don't like this." "Neither do I," the captain admitted. But fear isn't evidence. Lucas remembered the words written in the mysterious journal. The greatest danger upon the sea is the fear that enters the human mind before reason has a chance to speak. Captain Rowe carefully closed the journal. "We'll take this with us." Oliver looked surprised. "You believe it belongs on the Silver Crest?" The captain nodded. "It belongs somewhere people can study it. Knowledge hidden in darkness helps no one." As Thomas wrapped the journal in oilcloth, Lucas continued examining the strange chamber. Something caught his eye. Near the enormous globe, one section of the floor looked different. The wood was newer, only slightly. He crouched beside it. "Captain." Rowe walked over. "What is it?" Lucas tapped the planks. Unlike the surrounding floor, these boards sounded hollow. Thomas joined them. "We've already found one hidden room." Oliver smiled faintly. "Apparently this ship enjoys keeping secrets." Captain Rowe knelt beside Lucas. Together they pried loose the first plank. Beneath it, there was no treasure, no hidden weapons, only a small waterproof wooden box. The box was barely larger than a loaf of bread. Its brass lock had turned green with age. Captain Rowe carefully opened it. Inside rested only 3 objects: a beautifully crafted brass pocket watch, a faded family photograph protected inside a glass frame, and a sealed envelope, no name, no address, only 4 handwritten words: "If I do not return." Nobody spoke. Captain Rowe carefully opened the envelope. The paper inside had yellowed with age. The handwriting matched the mysterious journal. He began reading aloud. "If someone finds this letter, then my crew has almost certainly failed to return home. Do not remember us for disappearing. Remember us for refusing to abandon one another. Every decision I made was to give someone else another chance to live. If even one child reached home because we stayed behind, then every sacrifice was worthwhile. The sea owes us nothing, but we owe each other everything. Tell my daughter that every sunrise I witnessed reminded me of the mornings we watched together from the harbor. Tell her I carried that memory farther than any map could ever measure. And if she ever wonders whether I was afraid, tell her the truth. I was afraid every single day. But courage was never about feeling fearless. It was about choosing love over fear, always." Captain Rowe lowered the letter. No one spoke for a long time. Finally, Oliver quietly asked, was he talking about himself? Captain Rowe nodded. "I believe this was the captain of the Midnight Star." Lucas looked again at the faded photograph. It showed a smiling man standing beside a little girl, no older than 6. They were holding hands on a sunny dock. The same man, the same eyes, only without the exhaustion, without the fear. Daniel stared at the picture. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Captain Samuel. He never abandoned us." Captain Rowe gently placed the photograph back into the box. "No. He stayed. And he made sure someone would one day know the truth." Lucas felt a lump rise in his throat. For the first time since boarding the ghost ship, the place no longer felt haunted. It felt heartbroken. Every broken window, every abandoned cabin, every silent hallway. They were not reminders of monsters. They were reminders of ordinary people who had faced extraordinary circumstances. Captain Rowe carefully handed the wooden box to Lucas. "Carry this." Lucas accepted it with both hands. It felt surprisingly heavy. Not because of its weight, because of the story it contained. Just then, a bright beam of sunlight pierced through a crack high in the hull. It landed directly across the ancient globe. The polished oceans shimmered brilliantly. And something unexpected happened. A hidden line began glowing across the surface. Not painted, engraved, a route. Invisible until touched by sunlight. The glowing line stretched across the ocean, ending at a tiny island that appeared on no modern chart. Every eye fixed on the globe. Thomas whispered, "I don't think." That route was meant to stay hidden forever. Captain Rowe slowly smiled. For the first time, I believe the Midnight Star has stopped warning us. He looked at the glowing path one last time and started guiding us. Captain Rowe carefully wrapped the ancient globe with his eyes one final time before turning toward the staircase. "We've seen enough." Thomas nodded. "And we've stayed long enough." Lucas glanced once more at the glowing route etched across the globe. It was already fading. As the sunlight shifted across the old chamber, the brilliant line slowly disappeared until nothing remained except an ordinary-looking map. If Lucas hadn't witnessed it himself, he would never have believed it existed. Oliver picked up the lantern. "Let's go." One by one, they climbed back through the narrow passage. The old chamber disappeared behind them. Thomas closed the hidden wooden panel exactly as they had found it. Some secrets, he thought, deserved patience before being revealed to the world. As they entered the main corridor again, something immediately felt different: the air. It was warmer. Lucas frowned. "Do you smell that?" Captain Rowe stopped walking. "Smoke." "Not old smoke. Fresh smoke." Everyone froze. Thomas rushed toward the nearest staircase. The moment he reached the first landing, he looked upward. His face changed instantly. Fire. Captain Rowe didn't waste a second. "Move." The group sprinted toward the upper deck. As Lucas burst through the hatch, a blast of heat struck his face. Bright orange flames climbed one side of the shattered main mast. Pieces of burning canvas drifted through the air like fiery leaves. The abandoned ship was burning again. But this time, the fire had only just begun. Oliver scanned the empty deck. How? No lightning. No storm. No one else here. Captain Rowe looked around quickly. Then his eyes narrowed. The signal lantern. Near the bow, an old oil lantern had shattered across the deck. Its cracked brass frame still rolled gently between the planks. Oil spread like a dark river beneath the flames. Thomas understood immediately. It must have fallen when the ship rolled. Captain Rowe nodded. The fire wasn't waiting for us. It was waiting for one spark. The flame spread frighteningly fast. The ancient timber had dried beneath years of salt and sunlight. Within seconds, another section of railing burst into flames. Daniel looked toward the longboat tied beside the ship. "If the ropes burn, we'll lose our way home." Captain Rowe pointed immediately. "Lucas." "With me." The two men sprinted across the smoking deck. Heat shimmered around them. Burning pieces of canvas floated downward from above. One landed only inches from Lucas's shoulder. Thomas and Oliver grabbed heavy buckets, throwing seawater onto the advancing flames to slow them. Not to save the ship, only to buy time. Lucas reached the side of the vessel. The thick rope securing the rescue boat had already begun smoldering. Captain Rowe pulled out his knife. "Cut the backup line." Lucas hesitated. "If we cut it, the boat will drift away." Captain Rowe shook his head. "Not if we lower it first." Together they worked with astonishing speed. Lucas untied one knot while the captain loosened another. The heavy longboat descended slowly toward the waves below. The rope smoked. Small flames raised along its twisted fibers. "Hurry!" Thomas shouted from across the deck. "The mast!" Lucas looked up. The already damaged mast leaned farther than before. Loud cracks echoed through its splintered wood. Captain Rowe didn't need to say a word. Everyone understood. The mast was about to fall. Oliver jumped into the longboat first. Daniel followed with difficulty. Thomas tossed down the wrapped journal and the small wooden memory box. Lucas caught both before they struck the floor of the boat. Captain Rowe remained on deck, still checking every corner. Lucas stared upward. "Captain." The mast groaned again. A shower of burning splinters rained across the deck. "Captain." This time Captain Rowe ran. Halfway to the railing, a thick burning beam crashed directly in front of him. The impact exploded into a cloud of sparks. His path was blocked. Lucas didn't think, he acted. Without waiting for permission, he climbed back onto the burning ship. Thomas shouted behind him, "Lucas." But Lucas was already running. Thank you so much for listening all the way to the end of today's story. We truly appreciate you spending your time with us, and we hope this episode helped you enjoy a relaxing and meaningful English listening experience. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking the video, subscribing to English audio stories, and turning on notifications so you won't miss our next episode. Your feedback means a lot to us. If you have any suggestions, ideas, or comments about today's story, please leave them in the comment section below. We read every comment, and your support helps us create even better stories for our community. Until next time, take care, keep practicing your English, and let your imagination travel through every story. See you in the next episode on English Audio Stories. Goodbye and happy learning.